If you normally shoot right-handed, should you from time to time practice left-handed and vice versa, or not? That is a good question, and that is a question that has been asked lately on this channel, and I have a little bit of information to share about that, so that's what this video is going to be about. During the time period that I lived at the Olympic Training Center, I had many issues, many successes, and many questions for many different types of experts, whether that be from a neuro-type scientist, people who are specializing in kinesthetics and brain connections and neuromuscular connections, to sports therapists, physical therapists, and trainers and things like that. And one of the questions that was brought up a few different times on a few different occasions is, what do you do to balance out your system? Meaning, archery is a single-sided sport. You draw back with one arm, hold it out with the other, always turning your head one direction. And the main question is that good or is that bad? That question was not just asked by me to the experts, but also some of those experts asked me, what do I do to combat single-sided issues or potential issues? When you develop one side over another, you can have many different things happen. Not just physical differences in mass, and size, and dexterity, and strength, potentially flexibility, and some other things. But on a deeper level, inside your brain, things actually happen as well. Some of those can be causes for concerns, but in short, luckily, archery is not an impact sport. There is no real risk to severe long-term health issues from doing archery. Even if you shoot borderline unhealthy amounts of arrows like I did, single-sided, it didn't really cause any permanent damage. There are things that I may deal with over time, like maybe some arthritis here or there. I don't know. We'll find out as I get older. But basically everything that I dealt with in archery that was caused by single-sided stuff has basically gone away. I have no real issues. Some of those issues were intercostal muscle issues, rib issues, neck issues, and things like that. Sometimes low back pain and issues with the hips. But it was basically all related around one thing. That is always turning my head one direction, always drawing back the bow with one side, and always doing everything as much as I can, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times a day, one way, and never doing it the other way. I look horrendously bad drawing a bow back left-handed, and I may look like I'm okay in a decent position. This is a light stretch band, which is pretty easy to do, but when I go to release, my feeling, my dexterity, my ability to make my body listen is so weird because it just doesn't do it the same. And it's not even remotely in the same class as far as my ability to control it. So my main concern, first and foremost, was injury prevention. Because I went to sports med a lot, I had to go in there for recovery purposes, prehab, rehab exercises, because I really had some postural issues when I was a kid. Very, not weak, but I had a tendency to wing. That means the scapulas would come out away from the spine or away from the rib cage and flare out, and it would wing outwards. They would poke outwards away from my back. It's very typical, especially in youth these days. And so my main goal was to basically just go in there to prevent that type of stuff from happening because I knew it caused shoulder issues and things like that due to actually having those when I was younger. My main concern was injury prevention, and a lot of those trainers, physical trainers, sports therapists, that kind of stuff, physios, whatever you want to call it, depending on where you are in the world, all the same type of thing. Basically, they said, well, what do you do to balance it out? And my answer was nothing. I simply don't have the time to shoot my bow left-handed. I shoot my bow right-handed 400 to 500 times each day from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or even earlier to later. And how on earth will I possibly have enough energy to go out there and try to balance it out left-handed? Plus, the Olympics, I'm shooting right-handed, so why would I practice left-handed? I'm here to win the games, not here to have a healthy, happy life. So what's the deal? And basically, you know, after a back and forth, and they said, you really should, and I said, but I don't have time, I don't have the energy, it takes, and if I did, it would take away from developing the single-sided way, the right way, right-handed way. And so, basically, after I asked them, well, what is the main concern? The main concern is long-term health issues. Okay, what is caused by that? Impact, high levels of really, really strenuous exercise and things like that, doing it one way all the time, and it potentially leading to permanent scoliosis or things like that. So I asked them, okay, well, am I at risk for those type of things? And they said, no, and it wasn't a confident no. So my concern was, okay, well then what can I do outside of shooting left-handed, because I just don't have the time for that. What can I do to basically prevent some potential long-term issues? And they said, basically just go through a general strength training routine. That will help balance the body. You'll at least be strong enough on the left side, so you won't really have any long-term issues. And I said, okay, I can justify that. I can justify carving 45 minutes 3 times a week out of my schedule to make sure, or at least leave a little bit of energy left in the tank to go lift some weights and make sure my body stayed healthy and balanced enough. And also, I added in not just getting massage and recovery, like for example, turning the head to the left all the time. My SCM, that's this muscle right here, the sternocleidomastoid, I believe. That's what this muscle is. This one was hugely developed compared to this one. I don't know if it's still that way. And so I would get work on the muscle, get work on the neck, and actually help clear things up to make things movable and have no real issues. I added strength training into my routine and specific recovery on purpose with the intent of recovery, because people who have trained really hard for anything know and tell you that recovery is just as important as training, because if you're training hard enough, you genuinely need the recovery to be able to train hard again the next day. Then later on, several years later, after dealing with all those type of things and coming up with a plan, a person came into my life that introduced a few different things to my knowledge base. Mostly it was proprioception, the connection of the brain to the muscles, and specifically he was an expert in that field, and asked me, what do you do to balance out the right-left issue? You're always shooting stuff right-handed, and you're not doing anything left-handed. What are you doing to balance it out? And I told him, well, I'm strength training, and I'm recovering, and I'm doing these kind of things, as I just told you. And he said, that might be a problem, and potentially can cause a plateau effect, and can cause basically this potential barrier that you might need to break through, and the only way to do it is to strengthen the left side to get better at doing something on the left side. And I asked him, what do you mean by that? And he said, and this is what he claimed, I don't know, he didn't supply me peer-reviewed papers and journals and stuff like that for me to actually see, and I've done a bit of searching on my own, can't find the data. And if anybody out there knows about this and can share in the comments below or something to not just enhance my knowledge but also other people out there that are interested, he said basically there's a mechanism inside the brain that will prevent further development of the single side, because the brain can recognize an imbalance, and when it gets too far imbalanced, it has some sort of mechanism that kicks in and says, okay, stop wrapping myelin, stop doing proprioception, and stop developing the one side, because this other side is so undeveloped and we don't want issues here. We don't want this to completely get lost and be unable to control things on the other side. Now, I asked him, but how serious is that? Is it a genuine thing? And he said he believed at a very high level of proficiency, dexterity, attention to detail, and the ability to really manipulate and control things at an extreme high end of the spectrum can cause some potential roadblock, like I said, where the brain just stops developing this way because the other side is so undeveloped. And so you could develop this side, and that would allow this side to go up, and so on. And that would elevate your overall ability to have skill. Like I said, in short, to answer the original question of, is there concern to be left-handed, right-handed, and to only shoot one way, and should you do it the other way? Like I said, the answer is no. There's no real cause for concern, but in theory, and in a perfect world, it would of course be better for you to balance out the situation, to balance out the equation, and to not just shoot right-handed, but to also shoot left-handed, to learn how to aim with your left eye, to learn how to load your arrow with your left hand, and do those very basic things that we take for granted right-handed. And really, you don't even realize that you're so good at it right-handed and not good at it left-handed until you hurt your right hand and you can't use it and you try to use your left hand and you're like, holy cow, how do I go throughout life only using one hand? It happens. It's crazy, but it happens. So if I were to do it all over again and I were to be talking to my younger self, what would I do? Would I approach it differently, and would I change the past or reinvent a potential new future? And I think what I would tell myself is to try to shoot left-handed every so often, a couple times a month, and not even really seriously. Just shoot some arrows left-handed. Try to do some strengthening on the left side. Even grab my regular bow, which is way too heavy to try this, but I'm going to try it anyway and sit there and learn how to get into the position even with the high draw weight, which is really hard for me for a few different factors. One of those, which I can see from my perspective, but you may not be able to see from yours, is this arm. I can straighten this elbow perfectly straight. This one doesn't go straight. It's got a bend in it. I just don't have the range of motion because it's been in flexion for so long, and I'm sure the bicep is tight on this side, and it's probably even changed the shape of my joint. So I may not even be able to get straight on this side because when I was younger, I did so much shooting and it was always this way. So I bet you I probably changed, manipulated, affected my growth plate development, which is a whole other thing that I wish archery had some science resources to use and explore upon, which is a separate topic, and maybe we'll talk about it someday, about affecting growth plates and potential limits that younger archers should have, not just in draw weight, but arrow volumes, for reasons that we do that in other sports like baseball. We limit the amount of pitches they can throw, we limit how long, how many pitches, the rest in between, days in between, and there's a whole science and a whole system to it because they've done a lot of studies on it. They haven't in archery. I wish we could. Maybe one day. That aside, I would encourage myself to develop left-handed slightly, ever so slightly, just to balance out the equation, to learn how to use the left hand easier, to be a bit more proficient at it, only with the end goal in mind of maybe, just maybe, I could have been a little bit better right-handed because of that. And if I would have done it earlier on in my early days when I had the ability to and the time to, I think it probably would have translated, and it possibly would have translated rather, in the future, developing right-handed only. Later on, after I talked to that person that was the brain neuromuscular connection specialist, I decided that I would try to focus a little bit more on developing both sides, and I would use a stretch band, not just right-handed, but also left-handed, and really try to strengthen a lot of things on this left side that were lacking compared to the right side. After working through those kind of things and trying to strengthen the left side some and get a bit of dexterity and control out of it, I do believe my overall archery health improved. Maybe my scores improved, but definitely just overall body condition absolutely improved when I added a little bit more to balance out the equation. So this isn't any sort of groundbreaking video. It's just an interesting question that was asked to me, if strengthening or shooting one-sided all the time has any sort of cause for concern, and if so, what would I do to address that? And, you know, I just shared from my perspective, my journey and my individual experience of the questions that I've gotten over the years from health experts, as well as some of the questions I asked to those health experts, as well as their responses. So, like I said, not very groundbreaking or interesting, but in the future, I would genuinely really like the opportunity, or to find somebody who has the opportunity to study growth plate issues or effects when shooting archery, because it is single-sided, it is loaded in a static position, but generally young archers aren't shooting tons of draw weight and tons of arrows, but there are some exceptions out there. I was one of those, not necessarily draw weight, but definitely arrow volume. And I really think it would be smart as an industry to put a little bit of resources into that exploration, because they do it in other sports and they take those kind of things very seriously.